Hello, guitar teachers and students. Welcome back. So we've been going pretty hard on the hardcore guitar lessons for a couple months now, and I thought it would be fun to just do something a little bit different, kind of fun. Because it's me though, we have to put some sort of constructive spin on it, or I'm just not going to be happy with it. So here's my idea. So over here on the right, you'll see a list of genres. So these are the genres that feature electric guitars that I, a guitar player in a flyover state, trying to eke out a living with various gigs and such, have been paid to play. So to that extent, I feel pretty comfortable talking about them, right? And then over here, this big bit, we have your standard tier list, so S being the best and D being the worst. And then we have a bunch of guitar brands. So we don't have every guitar brand here, that would take forever. But the idea is we're going to look at each of these brands and sort of cross-reference them with the list of genres over here and say, okay, does this brand make a guitar that has an iconic sound that's heard in this genre? Of course, you can buy a guitar from any of these brands and get by in any of these genres. I mean, you'll do fine. But there's a difference between getting by and nailing that sort of iconic sound, right? So that's what we're looking for. Do these brands make stuff that nail an iconic sound found in these genres? So first, easy, Fender, S tier. Number one, top S tier, no question about it. Classic rock, Telecasters all over it. Modern rock, Telecasters all over it. R&B, the genre was pretty much invented on Telecasters. Blues, you got Muddy Waters. Prog rock, absolutely. Stoner rock, absolutely. Punk / adjacent, absolutely. El Jefe from NoFX plays a Telecaster, and he's just one of many. Rockabilly, it's funny. The one guitar that I've seen Brian Setzer play that was not an orange Gretsch 6120 was a Telecaster. Emo and Midwest emo, man, this whole genre is just like Telecaster, the genre. Modern worship, you really want to be able to nail those jangly, clean sounds and get a little dirt when you want it. Telecasters obviously nail that. Indie rock, nail it. I mean, it's got some of the same criteria as like the modern worship stuff and the emo, Midwest emo stuff. Music theater is actually a good test because if you've ever played one of these gigs, you'll know that the different sounds that you're required to get over like an hour, 3-hour period, something like that, are oftentimes very diverse. So to that end, I would say because we've just checked off like basically this entire list with the Telecaster, yeah, it would be a good call for music theater gig. Jazz, we got Julian Lage, right? He's really the only like Telecaster jazz player that I can think of. Jazz is kind of funny because really you can nail like the jazz tone on pretty much any guitar, in my opinion. Once you roll off the tone knob that much, you kill a lot of the individual character of the guitar, and it seems like a lot of times jazz players just pick the guitar almost half based on aesthetic, right? Because they have the mental image of the jazz guitarist with a big hollow body and he's got the little hat, right? And maybe some kind of vest. So can a Telecaster nail the jazz tone? Absolutely. Can it nail the jazz aesthetic? Maybe not the best. And then for pop, yeah, absolutely. You can nail clean tones, you can nail distorted tones. There are Telecasters absolutely all over that genre too. And the funny thing is I just went down this whole list and just thought about Telecasters. That's not to mention the Stratocaster, which can be found on probably half of this list. That's not to mention like the Jangle fam, like the Jaguar and Jazzmaster, and arguably Mustang. To me, a Mustang is more like what I wish a Strat was. But yeah, I mean, again, half these genres, you can absolutely go and find some iconic recording that was done with, a member of the Jangle family. So because of that, Fender, top of the S tier, easy pick. And if I had to pick one guitar out of their entire catalog to just nail this whole list, Telecaster, easy pick. All right, so next we have G&L. So G&L, kind of in a weird position, right? Because they do make Strats, they do make Tellies. So I could easily say the same things about G&L that I said about Fender, but I don't feel like those designs really belong to that company, even though it's like the same dude, right? That being said, they do have some iconic sounds to them. Those little Strat pickups that look like P-bass pickups, that's a G&L thing. They have their own sound to them. It's a good sound. I wish we heard it more. They have those big black rectangle looking pickups that are super hi-fi. That's a great sound. I wish we heard it more. So to that end, you get a good G&L guitar, you can nail anything in this list. But if we're looking at the list and saying, okay, can I think of anybody on this list that has an iconic G&L sound that comes from either the little split pickups or the big rectangle ones that they came up with? And it's not really. That's not to say that it can't be done. You could be the one to do it. But there's no genre on this list that I would say that you absolutely need a G&L for. That being said, I do give them all the credit in the world for having guitars that have a very iconic sound to them. So I'm going to go ahead and put them in A tier. I think A is safe. So next up we have Gibson. I got to do it. I got to do it. And full disclosure, you don't need a Gibson to do any of the things that I'm about to say. Just go get yourself an Epiphone, go to a store, play a bunch, find one that feels really good in your hands and has a really resonant body. Change the pickups if you need to. But let's take a look at some of the iconic Gibson sounds. So if you have a guitar tone in your mind and humbuckers are involved, there's probably a 75% chance that you're hearing some sort of Gibson like a Les Paul or an SG in your mind. So to that end, classic rock, absolutely. Modern rock, absolutely. R&B, I don't feel like you see a ton of Les Pauls in R&B. It certainly can be done, but this may be a genre that I don't really give them full credit for, at least on the humbucker side. Blues, nothing they make is as popular for electric blues as the Stratocaster, like straight up. But that's not to say that there's not some Les Paul electric blues out there. There's quite a bit. It's just not on the level of the Strat. Prog rock, the dude in Mahavishnu Orchestra played that little double SG thing, so yeah, we gotta give him credit there. Stoner rock, I feel like 90% of the genre happens on a Les Paul. Punk and punk adjacent stuff, again, I feel like probably 75% of the genre happens on a Les Paul. Rockabilly, I feel like you need to go back to the original Sun recordings and stuff to find somebody playing a Les Paul. That being said, if you get one with a good Alnico 5 bridge pickup, it'll nail the twang thing all day. Emo and Midwest emo, I think they've almost made a point of not using Les Pauls because you have to understand, the punks used Les Pauls back in the 80s when you could get them for like nothing because everybody wanted super strats. They were super cheap. By the time emo and Midwest emo came around, such was not the case. People were already paying thousands of dollars for Les Pauls. So, you know, the $350 early 2000s Mexican Telecaster was the way to go. Modern Worship, I don't know a lot about what these dudes use. I will say that like a humbucker Les Paul could do it. Indie rock, again, you don't see a lot of them because it was pioneered by poor kids in a time when they were far too expensive, like now. Music theater, it would be a good call. You can probably get all the tones that you need for those sorts of gigs. Jazz, I mean, Les Paul was a jazz player. He invented the Les Paul, obviously, so it can be done. It does not have the big hollow body aesthetic that goes with the vest and the hat, but it is an excellent jazz guitar nonetheless. And then pop, of course, you see Les Pauls all over the place. Going through thinking about P90s and mini humbuckers, I gotta give Gibson credit for those too. P90s you can find in pretty much any of these genres, even, you know, if it's not on a Gibson product, we gotta give them credit for the P90. And then mini humbuckers, honestly, mini humbuckers never really got their time in the sun as, you know, the guitar to have for a certain tone. Unless you're chasing like the Johnny Winter thing. I guess we can give him credit for blues. But either way, if you're out there gigging, you should probably have like a humbucker Les Paul or a P90 Les Paul. Maybe even both. I only have a P90 Les Paul. I wish I had a humbucker Les Paul too. Gretsch. This is going to be some personal bias, but I got to put Gretsch like at the top of A tier. And the funny thing about it is, do they have signature sounds? Yeah, they got a couple. So they have the Dynasonic pickups, which are sort of P90 adjacent, I would say. And then they have the Filtertrons, which are a really single coily sounding humbucker. It's funny, they make single coils that sound like humbuckers and they make humbuckers that sound like single coils. Both of them, absolutely though, are iconic sounds. So looking down this list and thinking about what iconic sounds you may find a Gretsch in. For blues, you got the Bo Diddley guitar. Punk and punk adjacent, the Kinks come to mind. You also have the entire genre of psychobilly, so that would be adjacent. Rockabilly, of course, like the entire genre is playing Gretsch right now. Emo, Midwest emo, I wish we had somebody, but nobody's brought the Gretsch sauce that I'm aware of. And then the other big one that stands out is Modern Worship. I think there's a guy from like Hillsong that has a signature Gretsch right now. So yeah, they do check a few off the list, but man, it kind of breaks my heart because as an owner of a couple Gretsch guitars, I can tell you, like, they nail 90% of this list. Like, they retain their character in a very Gretschy sort of way, but then also like check all the boxes that you would need for any of these things. They've just for some reason never got the attention that I think that they deserve. I think it's mainly because they've been sort of pigeonholed as a rockabilly guitar company. When you have a star that shines as bright as, Brian Setzer, it can be a little bit difficult to get out from under that sometimes. But because they do have several iconic sounds, because they can be found in several genres on this list, very prominently at that, we got to put them at the top of A tier. Not quite S, but it's a good thing to have in your kit if you've already got, your S tier stuff sorted. Personally, man, if I could have one guitar, it would be a Gretsch, but, that's just me. Ibanez is next. Where am I going to put Ibanez? Well, let's talk about Ibanez. So, Ibanez is kind of a weird guitar company, right? Because they don't have like a factory or really do like R&D to an extent. They kind of just like outsource all of their stuff and then put their name on it. And of course they're in charge of like, what the factories make and quality control and all that. But as far as things that they've done that are, really pioneering or in an effort to make a sound that can only be found on an Ibanez guitar, the only thing that comes to mind is maybe like 7-string guitars. I guess when Korn really wanted 7 and 8-string guitars and all that, Ibanez was the company that was like, cool, let's do it. Problem with that is it doesn't fit into any of these genres. So I have never got a call about a gig where they're like, hey, do you have a 7-string guitar? Just doesn't come up. I mean, you can get one, you can go start a metal band, and see how you do with that. But as far as, again, getting a call for gigs, I wouldn't say that Ibanez is a company that makes stuff that you absolutely need. I guess, though, I do kind of got to give them credit for, making the whole, like, 7-string thing big again. Let's call it the first B tier. Ibanez's first B tier. If you're an Ibanez fan, B tier is not bad. So Jackson. In my mind, I guess Jackson and Charvel and all them, I mean, all the like the super strat companies, they're kind of represented under Jackson for the purposes of this. The super strat thing was super popular in the 80s when they were doing the whole hair metal thing, and I personally love hair metal. I think it's an awesome genre. I wish it made a comeback. I like it so much more than like almost every other genre of metal, personally. And they do make some great stuff. If you get like a Jackson soloist or something like that, you can get by in any of these genres. I mean, you may get a couple weird looks showing up to like a blues gig with a Jackson, but so what, I mean, if the playing's there, then, nobody's going to question it. They're going to come up and compliment you and ask how you got such a good, let's say rockabilly tone out of your Jackson guitar. So do I give them credit for the iconic sound of the 80s and hair metal and stuff like that? Absolutely. Again, problem is it's not on this list at all. Do I want to put it at the bottom of A or at the top of B? I feel like they get more credit for original sound than Ibanez, absolutely. Let's put them at the top of B. Oh god, here we go. Okay, so PRS is next. And I know because I'm a dude on YouTube, you think that I'm going to tell you that a PRS and a Blackstar amp are all you need in the world, other than more PRSs and Blackstar amps. Here's the thing though, I will give them credit. The factory setups they do on their guitars are fairly peerless. Like, you can pick one up and it will play fantastic. Problem is, they don't have a sound, right? Like, the Silver Sky may be your favorite Strat style guitar, but can you give PRS credit for the Strat? Absolutely not. The Les Paul looking thing that they made for that dude from Creed, that could be your favorite Les Paul looking guitar. Do we give them credit for the Les Paul and the humbucker sound? Can't do it, absolutely not. And I know there's going to be some PRS purist that's saying, well, you get one of the ones with all the coil tapping and the phase and stuff like that, and then you can cover this whole list and be great. And that's fine, but I mean, you could put the same switching on a Gibson, and then you would have the iconic Gibson sound, and then you would have all the other ones that sort of work too. So to that end, I mean, I guess I can give them credit for setting the standard for how factory setup should be, but I can't give them credit for any sort of iconic sound at all. So one more time, if you have a PRS and you love it and you think it is the best any of these genre guitars that you've ever played, props to you. But because you will not find it on albums with any frequency of any of these genres that I'm aware of, I gotta put it in C tier, man. Maybe one day they can come up with a guitar that sounds iconically PRS and you can absolutely tell it's a PRS the minute you hear it. That day's not today. All right, next we have Rickenbacker. So Rick, I gotta give him credit, right? Because they do, those toaster pickups, they do have an iconic sound. Like, you know, you're going for that jangly, like Beatles kind of strummy, chordy thing. Like, they'll nail that. If you're a big fan of Against Me, Laura Jane Grace has been playing Ricks recently. If you're a big fan of the Smiths, Johnny Marr did a lot of his best work on a black Rick. That being said, that sound going down this list, where would you even put the Smiths? I mean, I know that technically it's classic rock now, but it's not, right? I mean, I would put it closer to indie rock. I don't have goth on this list. I think that they could definitely hold their own in emo and Midwest emo, punk and punk adjacent. Again, we got the girl from Against Me playing one, so we got to check off that. Indie rock, absolutely. Pop, I mean, the Beatles loved them, you know, need I say more? So to that end, if I got a call for something like a music theater gig where I knew I was going to have to cover a lot of bases, like a Rickenbacker would not be my first choice. In fact, I don't own one and I've never owned one. I've only played one like a couple times. It's rare that they come through town and they're always super expensive when they do. But for people after that sound, and there are a lot of people after that sound, that's the guitar that makes that sound. So I think I'm going to put them above G&L. Really, them and Gretsch, I feel like if I had a Rick, I could play around with it. There's a good chance that I would say, man, this is a sleeper guitar that can nail like all of these genres and people just don't know about it yet. But because of my limited experience, I have to put it below Gretsch because I know that Gretsch can do all that and I can only speculate that Rick can as well. And then last we have Schecter. There's not a Schecter sound. They have kind of like an aesthetic thing going on. I had a Tempest for a while and it was okay. I would put it on the level of like your standard Epiphone or something like that. But again, there's no Schecter sound. And looking at this list, I can't think of any genres that you would absolutely want a Schecter for. So I got to put them bottom of C, really. To their credit, they do have some big names that have come through their custom shop, like that Telecaster that Brian Setzer was playing. That was made by Schecter back in the day. Mark Knopfler had a couple Strats made by Schecter back in the day. Again, those two names, for me personally, are enough of a selling point that I'm like, yeah, I would feel comfortable buying a custom shop guitar from Schecter. But of the current lineup, there's just not anything that I think they're absolutely necessary for. So there's our final tier list. Up in S tier, we got Fender and Gibson. For A, we got Gretsch, followed by Rickenbacker, followed by G&L. In B tier, we got Jackson and Ibanez. And in C tier, we got PRS and Schecter. So hopefully you found value in this. If you feel compelled to comment, I just feel like there's a whole bunch of like PRS fans that are just gonna come like at me over this. But hopefully you can understand from my perspective why I rank things the way that I did. That is not to say that any of the brands on this list make bad guitars. They all make the guitars that, you know, are best for them in their heart. They believe them to be the best. And again, any of the brands on this list make a guitar that can absolutely cover all of these genres. Speculatively on Rick, but all the other ones, absolutely. The big make or break point, again, was just if you get into this genre, how often are you likely to find something that they made? Oh yeah, and do the like and subscribe and all that. God, I'm gonna get so many thumbs downs from PRS fans. What have I done? Okay, well, I'll see you guys back next week. Take care.